that I was talking about our conference that we're going to hold next June. It's still 12 and a half months away, but I hope everyone will set your calendar because it will be relatively inexpensive, probably under $500 to attend. And it's going to have a lot of very interesting things happening in it. Not the least of which will be my protege, who's Palestinian woman, Lana Shaheen, who I think will be able to come.
Oh, good.
And she's an artist, and she's going to tell us about her experiences, among other things.
Well, and my condolences to her recently, too. That was large.
Yeah, but I'm excited about that. And I just mentioned it to Vivian, so I'm hopeful that Vivian will join us also. And what I didn't tell you, Vivian, is it's going to be in Helena, Montana. so break out your map and look for Montana. It's one of the largest U.S. states, but it's in the far west. And
well, there's the Middle Earth, and then there's the Middle U.S., and I'm not sure if there's much difference.
Well, so Helena is right at the so-called Continental Divide, which is the highest point in North America. It's a backbone that runs up the spine of North America from wherever, from Arizona on up to northern Alberta. And if a raindrop drops on one side of the Continental Divide, it'll flow east, and if on the other side it flows west. They either go to ultimately the raindrops go either to the Atlantic or the Pacific Ocean. And so that's the point of the Continental Divide. And we're hopeful Nick Chan will join us too. That will be a very good one if he can. But we're going to have a lot of fun no matter what.
Well, even the pictures you showed, I mean, it's such a confluence place.
Yeah, and it's going to be in the studio of Tim Holmes, and that's an amazing place with 7,000 square feet, and you won't believe it to see it. But that isn't the reason I called you all here today. The reason I called you all here today is we're continuing with our readings of Diane Croft's book, The Unseen Partner. Can you hold it up during there? Thank you. The Unseen Partner, Love and Longing in the Unconscious. And I consider this book a sort of a trip through the major tasks that we have to pass through in our individuation process. And the other book is A Mystical Path Less Traveled by Jerry R. Wright, who is a retired Presbyterian pastor and a Jungian analyst. And the two books mystically go together.
And as he said, he fell off the back porch of the church. I love the way he put that. So
absolutely, me too. And hello, Sam, welcome. And Penelope, good morning. Nice to see you. And next Saturday, on June the 5th, we're going to have the author of this book, Religious But Not Religious, Living a Symbolic Life by Jason E. Smith. Jason Smith will join us at 2 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time next Saturday. And I urge you to attend. This is a very, very powerful and useful book.
It is. And Dr. Jean Raffa just did a review yesterday on her blog So he's getting, I feel, the wonderfully well-deserved support he deserves for that book.
Right. And I might just, before we begin on Diane's book and Jerry's book, I might just read a couple of things here. I'll just read a couple of pages because you can get a feel. I know that something is important in my reading when I have a lot of stars next to my underlines.
Right.
I make underlines, I make double underlines, and sometimes I put one or more stars. And this segment that I'll read to you has one segment that has 5 stars.
I was thinking about your book underlining yesterday. After I finished packing. I mean, I was finished, and of course, the last 5% takes the other 95% of the time. And when I finally got past the delusion finish and to the actual finish, your books came to mind, and I went, "Oh yeah, I'm Mr. Marginalia."
Mhm.
I find, other than the Red Book and The Temple and Man by Schwaller de Lubisch, those are the only 2 sets I've never written in, and I'm sure that will change. But your books came to mind. I don't know why. And when they did, there was like this, what does he put on the side? What does he put on this? Is it a star, 5 point, 7 point? Does he put an asterisk? And when it came to mind, I went, oh, I see. Those are the apses in Skip's cathedral.
Yeah.
And then it was just one of those.
And there's one other thing I do, which is sometimes I circle page numbers so that if I'm flipping through the page,
you get the whole thing.
Yeah. And so
so your big symbols just came to mind like an apse, APSE, like those little chaplets outside the into the sanctuary, into the nave. And so that's anyway. So I don't know.
Well, and
sidebar.
Okay. So anyway, he's talking about research of other researchers who say that if you have if you know what we mean by a religious instinct, you're going to be less. Data shows that you'll be less likely to commit suicide. But if you don't know, if you don't follow some spiritual path, and of course my spiritual path is underlining books because it confirms or denies what I'm doing in life. But if you don't have something, anything, whatever it is, then you might more likely commit suicide. And I found this perfect paragraph. And so, Jordan, this is a stump the stars question for you. I'm going to read this paragraph, and then I'm going to ask you whose initials I put next to this.
I hope they're not mine.
What initials? Okay, I put 2 initials next to this paragraph. Okay. Significantly, those without religious affiliation also showed greater levels of aggression, impulsivity, and substance abuse. As the authors note, quote, suicidal behavior is related to aggressive and impulsive traits, and anger predicts future suicidal behavior in adolescent boys. Adolescent boys. Past studies have shown that a strong religious attitude is correlated with lower hostility, anger, and aggressiveness, a finding that was borne out by the author's own research. One such study, for example, looking at twin samples, found that a religious upbringing moderated inborn genetic factors around what psychiatry calls disinhibition. which is manifested in such things as disregard for social conventions, impulsivity, and poor risk assessment.
You know, I have to say, I have to answer outside the bounds of the question with a trinity. It's either S.C., Skip Conover, or J.H., Jordan Hoggard, or J.F., Jorge Ferrer.
No.
So who is it?
It's D.T.
Okay, done. Okay.
The initials are D.T. Okay.
And that is?
Okay, let me just read it to you one more time so you are clear on it. One such study, for example, looking at twin samples, found that a religious upbringing moderated inborn genetic factors around what psychiatry calls disinhibition, which is manifested in such things as disregard for social conventions, impulsivity, and poor risk assessment.
So I'm curious what the T stands for in the DT. Who is that? Now I'm going to have to figure that out.
No, it's our former president.
Oh, sorry. He's never top of mind. So I had to pull that one. Oh, yeah. Disinhibition. Look at that. Look at that. Wow.
Yeah.
And good call.
And
can you read that one more time?
One more time.
That's wow. Encore. Bravo.
Now that I've disclosed the secret, so I've made the test easier.
Wow. That's big. I'm at the symphony right now, and I'm saying bravo. Encore. This is wow.
Jordan is looking at the ballpoint pen DT written on the palm of his hand.
What the heck is this? Remember to figure this out later.
Okay, so I'm going to read this last sentence, or it's one sentence, I guess. One such study, for example, looking at twin samples, found that a religious upbringing moderated inborn genetic factors around what psychiatry calls disinhibition, which is manifested in such things as disregard for social conventions, impulsivity, and poor risk assessment.
You know, I have to say that, I mean, there's regardless and irregardless is absurd, but inhibition and disinhibition is quite a powerful. I have not heard that term.
Yeah.
And there's quite a turn there that applies to DT. And I appreciate using initials so I don't have to actually say the name. But
this is how wait a minute. Okay, come on.
Your background is not going to allow it.
Yeah, I'm not. This isn't cooperating with me, so I will uncloak for the moment.
But
okay, so
but there and
double underline disinhibition.
That
5
word,
stars. And
I have to commend you with my 500,000 word vocabulary. I've never heard that word, and you circled the page too. But immediately disinhibition struck a chord that resonated from I do a lot of work with ferreting out blind spots, because that's where problems typically root, and people don't see them. But as a gardener, I'm going, well, you never see the roots of the weeds, but if you want to remove the weeds, you got to find them. But disinhibition is just that kind of blind spot work, where this is someone who doesn't have a lack of awareness of his inhibitions. It's disinhibition. I mean,
he doesn't have inhibitions.
Exactly.
Right.
There's such a lack of awareness that actually goes into actually goes beyond culpability and responsibility and goes into an absolute expertise, as it was,
Right.
with living with wrongness.
Right. And so either bullies or people that are born with silver spoons in their mouths get away with this. And the other example is Florence Foster Jenkins, about whom a movie was made with Meryl Streep playing the lead role. I think she had a lot of fun with that role.
Yeah,
And so if you haven't seen Florence Foster Jenkins, you must do. It's a tremendous movie. And basically,
well,
the people that were around her, always told her she was a great singer when she was poor at best, I would say.
mhm.
And the result was that she didn't have inhibitions about singing. Right up to the point.
Yeah, she just evoked. Yeah, just
right up to the point where her husband bought her an evening of the Met, where Metropolitan, or I guess it was Carnegie Hall. He
Carnegie
rented,
Hall at that point. Yeah.
he rented Carnegie Hall for a night and filled it with sailors and Marines coming back from World War II.
It's kind of ironic and funny too.
Yeah. So anyway, that's a amusing scene. But anyway, go ahead.
I think that whole scene that, Florence Foster Jenkins, and then we can flip the turnabout of that. When I, as I used to say, fight like fire, when you reach, I'm just not going to be there. You see me and then I'm gone. And then you fall. And then ha 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 ha. Oh, gravity is strong in this one. But the same concept applies when you say, when you were younger, everyone's yellow on the inside. Yeah. And so there's this wise defiance that I think I hadn't thought about it until just now when you mentioned disinhibition, Florence Foster Jenkins. I thought about yellow on the inside, and gravity is strong in this one. I'm making humor, but I'm not making violence. I'm actually eliminating it, and I feel like all four of those are this product of the unconscious, where it has such intensity. So what does Penelope say?
Penelope says the golden child is just as tragic in humanity as the abused child. Yeah.
Yes. Very much so.
Okay, so let me read these 2 pages. Now, I'm digressing for a moment. I'm in Religious but Not Religious.
Okay.
Living a Symbolic Life by Jason E. Smith.
Actually, it's really appropriate for today because this is our next one. And so we can deal with the passage of other times.
All right, but let me, just to give you an appreciation of the power in this book, because he's going to speak to the wisdom path next Saturday. Right. Next Saturday at 2 p.m. And so while you're commenting on these 2 pages, I'm going to pull up the link where you can sign up to make sure that you are invited and have the links for that and so on. I'll put it on the YouTube chat. And so here it goes. Okay, this is a passage in this book starting on page 119 called Therapy for the Disorders of the Soul. In the light of these studies, perhaps we can begin to understand why Jung felt that a religious outlook was the bedrock of psychological health, and why he once made a claim that every one of his patients in the second half of life became ill because they had lost this foundation. Quote, Among all my patients in the second half of life, that is to say, over 35, there has not been one whose problem in the last resort was not that of finding a religious outlook on life. It is safe to say that every one of them fell ill because he had lost what the living religions of every age have given to their followers, and none of them has been really healed who did not regain his religious outlook. Now, by this, he did not mean any specific religion. He did not mean following any creed. So my underlining books is a sacred thing to me. So,
Well, but I really drop back to the disinhibition, and this is not that. This is the disillusionment of someone who's, in a sense, lost everything. The snake of the 35-year-old has shed the skin of the previous life, but instead of shedding the skin to find all the new pretty colors of the new snake and the skin not miss, they shed the skin and say, WTF? I don't know what to do.
Is that all there is, right?
Yeah, and that, I wonder if because they didn't have a proper end of or post-adolescent rite of passage, that they don't know that this time between 35 and 42, which psychology typically notes and astrology as well, that it's time to make your own rite of passage.
Yeah.
Because they never had the first one. They don't know that now it's their job to make the incorporation of capital S self of who the heck you are.
Yeah. What is the meaning of your life?
Yeah. What is the meaning of your life in the living of it rather than the explaining of it? And there's a big difference I find there with explaining what you're doing versus living.
Well, and that's what having a creative life means too.
Exactly. No, so well said. Well said.
And so, all right. So let me go on with Jason Smith now. It is a difficult thing to live a human life, as the innumerable chorus of philosophers, theologians, psychologists, political activists, artists, and poets throughout history attest. In the deepest heart of all of us, there is a corner in which the ultimate mystery of things works sadly, wrote William James as he contemplated the question, is life worth living? In his essay of the same name. We are desperately in need of some framework that organizes the chaos of life events and crises into a cohesive, meaningful whole, shoring up our resilience and endurance shoring up our resilience and endurance so that we can achieve what Paul Tillich called the courage to be. All religions, wrote Jung, are therapies for the sorrows and disorders of the soul. This is not so much because religions provide moral precepts for living, but because through their symbols and stories, they can help us to develop an attitude which tries with charity and forbearance to accept even the humblest things in one's own nature. It is on the basis of this humble self-acceptance, Jung believed, that the evolution of both individual consciousness and the collective culture becomes possible. This is a radical idea. The sorrows and disorders of the soul are tended not through some program of moral or behavioral perfection, but through humble self-acceptance, a truly religious attitude, Jung is suggesting, looks with empathy and compassion on the reality of the human condition, which inevitably includes incompleteness, imperfection, and suffering. These are the torments that bring people into analysis and therapy, of which they hope to be cured. But any cure ultimately comes from finding meaningful context for these existential realities in our lives. Suffering is unavoidable in a human life, and yet, if we lack the means for bearing and understanding our sufferings, we are either broken by it, as the studies about suicide cited above attest, or we sorry, I'll go back. I'll go back and read that now. Where was I?
Right at
Okay, suffering
the
suffering
important
is
part.
right. Suffering is unavoidable in a human life, and yet if we lack the means of bearing and understanding our sufferings, we are either broken by it, as the studies about suicide cited above attest, or we seek ever more anxiously to find ways to avoid it. Given the proper means, a living symbol, a meaningful story, a religious outlook, our suffering can be turned from something destructive into something creative and transformative. In other words, suffering becomes a doorway to greater consciousness. And when we can establish a conscious relationship to it, new depths of our being are awakened. The experience of suffering is a spiritual problem. I'll read that again. The experience of suffering is a spiritual problem. It throws us into an encounter with life that calls up the question of why. That is the need for meaning. Any exclusively biological or rational approach to psychotherapy, a word which, as Thomas More has taught us, literally means care of the soul, will be inadequate to the task. So let me read that sentence abbreviated. Any exclusively biological or rational approach will be inadequate to the task. Jung is adamant on this point, noting that the experience of suffering takes us beyond the boundaries of normal everyday experience. While we are still within the purview of the normal and everyday, common sense and reason are of unquestionable value. However, once we cross over into the frontier of suffering, common sense and reason reach the limits of their helpfulness. Here, it is not reason that heals, but meaning. Suffering suffused with meaning becomes creative. It deepens our relationship to life and calls forth a response from within us that holds redemptive and transformative potential, often beyond the limits of our personal lives. It is with this understanding that Jung speaks of conveying to his patients a healing fiction, a story with the capacity to grip the mind and heart of the sufferer, and through which his mental and emotional pain can give way to renewal and aliveness. Thus, put out. I have a little stupid mark. Thus, out of the confusion of suffering comes the coherence of meaning, for we are people who need a story to live, a mythos. When we possess such a story, one that gives orientation to our lives, the experience of life becomes something filled with potential and possibility. Okay, you want to comment, Jordan?
Yeah, definitely. Years back, I decided that I'm not a criminal. So shame and guilt, they can walk the plank.
Mm-hmm.
They can go to the ocean. And what's interesting here is he's using a lot of the word suffering, but I make a distinction between pain and suffering. And pain is inevitable, but I find suffering to be a choice. And in a sense, it's often a self-pity choice. And I particularly, personally, don't waste trouble. Maybe it's bad that I run towards the bullets, but I engage and I enact because it's there. And not just because there's an opportunity to capitalize on, it's because that's experience. And I find that that not wasting trouble philosophy. Pain is also just influence or engagement or experience. But the suffering is the worry, which is a waste of it. Yes, exactly. Religious, but not religious. Suffering is the worry. That's a waste of imagination. And I think you read out in Alejandro Jodorowsky's Chariot months back, I will make a diamond out of my misfortune. And when you read that out from his text, that really spoke to my I don't waste trouble, which then to me goes back to shame and guilt walk the plank. And to this, pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice.
Right. Okay. So let me just address the suffering that I've experienced in my life a little bit. And you're going to think it's silly in a way, but I've had moments of great achievement in my life, quite a number of them, thankfully, but very few of them have been memorialized. I literally had to take off my clothes at Tim Holmes' studio to memorialize some of them. But and it wasn't about taking off my clothes, but
the shedding of veils, yeah,
right. But
the personas, you said,
yeah. But the point is that I've also had some lows. I've lost over $1 million of life savings during the crash of 2008, and that resulted ultimately in my having my home foreclosed. It took them 9 years to do it, which is
a statement of defiance of
right.
Will that I actually full on respect.
The credit only goes to the one who's in the arena, right? So
it's an imp with a capital I.
Whose face is covered with the blood and the sweat and the dirt.
But that's the person who they didn't sit on the sidelines.
But nobody's building a monument to that.
Right.
And so I've been examining my mortality for some years now, probably 20 years, and it's getting realer and realer. And I said to Debbie one time, and I said, I don't want a gravestone because, the gravestones of some of my great grandparents up in this cemetery up in northern New York. And nobody goes there anymore. Right. and so who cares? Right. And so she said, well, you have to build your own memorial. And
I can't believe you're talking about this because anyway, keep going.
And that's
such a synchronicity.
And that's what I'm doing. That's what this YouTube channel is, because it's going to survive long after me. And if you look up either of my names, either Skip Conover or Donald L. Conover on Google, you will find nearly 1 million hits. There's 780,000 in one case, and maybe 600,000 in another. And, the point is that immortality doesn't come from this consciousness surviving and knowing that it's surviving. It comes from your life's work still resonating through the human species. And, that's true of the Buddha, it's true of Jesus Christ. It's also true of Carl Jung and Alexander Solzhenitsyn and Ludwig von Beethoven. none of their consciousnesses remain, but the evidence of their spirit remains. And so that's why, and so that's in effect become sort of a motivation at a deep level of why I do this work. I hope that I offer something that young people can latch onto and see a way forward for themselves. But at the same time, I'm also intending to leave evidence of my spirit behind. And so that's why I do these things, including taking off my clothes. So,
well, and I have to say, I mean, I'm still, the last 5% takes the other 95% of the time deep into this moving halfway across the country.
Yeah.
And every time I make a big move, whether it's personally or geographically, death comes to mind.
Sure.
And my mountain climbing experiences come to mind, where I found life in death. Death smiles at us all. My joke is life is fatal. No one's getting out alive. Life is fatal. But that whole mortality thing seriously came up yesterday after respectfully putting my dog of 13 years, Lyra, down on Tuesday. But it came up in that context of the respectful pool of grief. And like you said, you start thinking about mortality. And I used to, when I felt that, I used to drive out to some cemetery further than I'd driven in the general area I was in. And I would do rubbings, just paper, and it didn't matter who. I wouldn't even look at them. I would rubbings, and I would get back to the studio and set them down on my desk. And I would see who came with me, who came back with me. But yesterday that came to mind, and I didn't feel like doing it the same way. So I went online and I typed tombstones. And that got kind of boring. So then I typed tombstones humor. Because I thought, wow, I'm gonna get some Jordans and skips going on here.
Yeah, well, you're leaving Philadelphia. I mean, W.C. Fields' tombstone says, "I'd rather be in Philadelphia."
Yeah, exactly. So he's already got this taken. So I got to go somewhere else. And exactly. But the first one that came up was, and I swear, I don't know if it was photoshopped or it was real, but the first, and that's pretty apropos with W.C. Fields. I'd rather be in Philadelphia. Cool, you can have it, man. W.C., you can have it. But the first one that came up was, "You're late. Try again tomorrow." And it's like, this is a dead person talking to you, shaming you. But don't worry about that. Try again tomorrow. I mean, but you're late. Try again tomorrow. And to me, that kind of embraces that whole religious but not religious, and frankly, the military discipline of the ritual.
Right.
I mean, any ritual performed consistently becomes a meditation.
Sure.
And that you were just speaking about. And I didn't want to just drop on the humor to be too dismissive or blithe, but at the same time, there is that humor in the death smiles at us all. Well, you might as well smile back.
Right. So Big Cat says suffering is the number one problem for humans. It's what all religions attempt to give meaning to. Penelope says, my financial losses saved me. And the Big Cat says, blessed are those who find meaning within their suffering. Yep, you sure are. Okay, so we're going to
Don't waste trouble.
We're going to
Don't
go
waste
on.
trouble.
We've blathered on for almost an hour, so let's go back to Diane, and we're going to talk about Hourglass, right? And so Diane's poem that was given to her in a numinous moment is: everything changes in this moment as each tiny particle passes through the void and breaks free. The last few quiver on the edge, hesitating, seconds before they disappear into the collective, unaware that the measure will turn and they will fall again. Okay, I'll read that once more.
Yeah.
Everything changes in this moment as each tiny particle passes through the void and breaks free. The last few quiver on the edge, hesitating, seconds before they disappear into the collective, unaware that the measure will turn and they will fall again. Wow. Okay. So that's,
yeah. There's so much of a drop, one little purple drop of dye in clear water there.
yeah.
I mean, that unending influence that will cycle back around to repeat.
Right. So this brings
Wow.
me back to my favorite quote from Dr. Jung, which I'm going to share again right now. We all sit at an eternal moment, and this is the magician card on the tarot. In other words, in every moment, you are the magician of your life, and you can decide what's going to happen in the next moment. So here's Jung's quote: "The great thing is now and here. This is the eternal moment. And if you do not realize it, you have missed the best part of life. You have missed the realization that you were once the carrier of life, contained between the poles of an unimaginable future and an unimaginably remote past. Millions of years and untold millions of ancestors have worked up to this moment, and you are the fulfillment of this eternal moment."
Yeah.
One should take each moment as the eternal moment, as if nothing were ever going to change, not anticipating a faraway future. For the future always grows out of that which is. You must live life in such a spirit that you make in every moment the best of the possibilities. Okay. Now, that's exactly the magician card in the tarot, which is
and the high priestess that give form to the formless in the moment. That because the magician is that spark, inception, formlessness, but the formlessness is the present, but the giving form to the formless is also in the present, and that's the action of the high priestess. So I love that eternal moment gig. I mean, I've always called it the perpetual present. The confluence of memory and dream. But I love the way Carl Jung expressed the concept of eternal moment from his perspective. That really is a call to action. It is a call to, you are never ready, so stop waiting. You know, you preparation is cool. That's good.
right.
Discipline's cool. Practice is great. But there comes a point when, don't worry, you'll never be ready. Let's go now. Time's up, boys. Let's move.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, time's up. Let's go now.
Yeah.
It will never be perfect. Just
right.
I
it won't be perfect until we do it, but then it'll be gone. Because we'll be doing something else.
I love this scene in Shakespeare in Love where Shakespeare is walking along with Geoffrey Rush, and he's worrying about the play that they're going to put on that day, and he's worrying about this and that, and Geoffrey Rush says, "Well, don't worry, it will be all right." And Shakespeare says, "How will it?" And Geoffrey Rush says, "I don't know. It's a mystery." And And the point is that, in a play, everything does come together. And in our lives, everything does come together. You don't know what you're going to be doing 10 minutes from now. But, it's going to rush together in that moment 10 minutes from now. And you will be ready and it will be okay, whatever it is.
I remember sitting with two interns and we had like 18 hours left, right? And I'd been out of town for a week. So they've been on their own working. They've been on their own, given enough rope to hang themselves. But they got to complete it. And I show up and I knew, make sure I show up, half a day or so before, because I knew it wouldn't be ready. But I was taught too. So it was my job to teach them. But I remember showing up going, guys, I know you don't understand what I mean when I say it's good to be comfortable with the not knowing and still get things done. But right now, you don't need to be comfortable with the not knowing. It's just that your life now depends on it. And I walked out of the room. And I swear they finished 6 hours early.
Yeah, I'm sure they did.
And it was to confuse them enough that they came online for themselves. They were on point because guess what? Like I said, your life depends on it. Now, I'm sure that I'm going to get fired and all that shit goes through their head, but you may not understand my comfortability with not knowing and all that abstract, but it doesn't matter. Your life just depends on it. And when I walked out of the room, there are no questions. There's no clarification. You're going to die if you don't.
Right.
And the thing is, and then they did. And the thing is, what was really cool is they really did all on their own. It had nothing to do with me. And it just reminded me of the leadership of you can move someone by manipulating them. And that's all you. And that's a bunch of BS because it doesn't expand. But you can also move someone by inspiring them. And that's not you. And that's them. And then they can do that for someone else too. And I don't know if I have a more favorite moment than that day when I went, it doesn't matter if you don't understand my abstract stuff. Your life just depends on it.
Yeah, why I like my moment when, I always imagined that I would go to Japan and build a company there. And ultimately I did. But what the process was that I had to give up the practice of law entirely. I had to sell my home in Rochester, New York, and it was a beautiful home, and pick up my young family, where I had two daughters who were 3 and 5, and one that was still in her mother's womb and 7 months along. And then the company hands me a $5,000 travel advance. And so we get on an airplane.
Which then was actually something.
Yeah, a Japan Airlines airplane. And the cabin attendant comes to my wife and points to her large belly and says, "Are you okay, really?" Because she was 7 months gone at that point. And she says, "Oh yeah, I'm okay." And so off we went, and we get to Japan and check into this hotel. And 1 week later, they slipped the bill for the hotel under my door, and it was $5,000. And I go, oops.
Yeah, I need more money.
so here I am in Japan. I have a pregnant wife who can't leave Japan now because she's too close to delivery. And I have these two little girls in the hotel with me. I better get some more money.
So yeah, I need
figure
more
out
money
what to
now.
do.
It's like
Yeah, figure out what to do. Yeah. Anyway, okay.
well,
So
no, but that goes back to your story too of even when you quote unquote left law, or it had left you, and after a while you kind of the heart and the mind kind of aligned
right.
to grok it,
Yeah.
and you went, oh, I'll just make my own job. I mean,
Yeah.
so I love that moment when there's the, oh, I need more money.
Yeah.
And if a friend is in the room who is not also self-employed, they'll be like, well, why don't you look worried? I said, this is a concept and this is a verb. When I say I need more money, that's a verb.
Yeah.
That is not a call or a cry. It's, oh, I need more money is not even what am I going to do about it? That's the verb. I need more money. So make that happen. I already made my own job. So make that happen. That's actually a requirement. Maybe you don't get it yet. So I love it when you said you made your own job. Right. Because that to me is that bigger picture of that same self-employment verb. This is not a to-do list. This is not a call to action. It's I've got two girls, one on the way, and a wife, and a slip of paper under the door. So I need more money. It's not how do I. It's not how do I. It's like I am going to. There's not even
definitely
a
come to Jesus moment.
Yeah, that's. I think I laughed that people will say, well, I've been your client for 7 years. Why did you sign your name on the contract so slowly today? And I said, well, I wanted to be employed a little longer. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, you see, because there's the good news and bad news. The good news, I'm signing my name, signed up a project. And then there's bad news. I got to do the work. So I said, I'm only self-employed while I'm signing my name. After that, I got to do the work. So.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So then there was another moment 10 months later when I had gotten the cash flowing, and then I had a realization that I was costing the company $750 a day. And I was having trouble getting people's attention back in headquarters. And one of my chief mentors, who was later the best man in my second wedding, came out to Japan, and we went to Taiwan together. And on the way back from Taiwan to Japan, I remember the airplane is taking off. And, I said to him, I have to get more attention in Rochester because I'm costing the company $750 a day. And my mentor says, don't you see, Skip, I had to get you to costing $750 a day before anybody would pay any
attention to you. Well, so. Actually right there had to get you to $750 a day cost to get people to pay attention, to get people to notice. That to me goes to Diane's Hourglass quote from Edinger. It just almost
we haven't read the quote yet, so
we haven't, but to me that dovetails seamlessly right into that.
Right. So the quote from Edward Edinger's Ego and Archetype is, we are both unique indivisible units of being, and also part of the continuum, the universal wave of life. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we are both unique, indivisible units of being, and also part of the continuum, the universal wave of life. And that was you and and your mentor right in that moment.
Yeah.
Where you are expressing an actuality, a living experiential actuality of I'm costing too much. What am I making? I'm costing this. I'm in debt because where's my value? And then he trumped you to say that was
the point
to be your value. Look, this guy could cost us this much. Look what he could do. And then they notice and go, oh, upstart from their normal daily routine. And they go, oh, opportunity. Yeah. But I love the scale of that story from you stepped up where you were as large as you were.
Right.
And he didn't get bigger. He just changed the scale so that you would see yourself in a different light. And at that point, there was no shame. There was no pro or con. I mean, that's a man who's had the pros and the con and the shame and the guilt. They walked the plank years ago.
Oh, yeah.
He doesn't give a rat's about those.
Right.
He doesn't probably care about profit. He cares about effectiveness.
Right.
And he was utilizing you as the human capital to then go, well, this is the way I see it. But when he said his perspective, it opened up yours.
And actually, that was a critical question they asked me during my interview with this company. Okay, the second week of interviews, but the question that I remember from that whole 5 days of interviewing was, do you believe in efficiency or effectiveness?
That's my favorite question, actually.
Right.
Oh, I love that question.
Right.
I wonder how you answered it, but anyway.
Well, you know how I answer.
I think so.
I mean, it goes to my rule that never trust anyone with a clean desk. Right.
Well, yeah. To me, efficiency is all about speed, and effectiveness incorporates value. And it doesn't matter how long it takes. It's going to take the time, because time's a myth in profit, and value is not a myth in profit. So, I mean, yeah.
Well, and as I look around my room, and I have no problems with the clean desk issue, I think about how, everyone worries about, wishes that their parents would clean up all the loose ends before they die, right? But they never do. Well, they never do. You always have to go sell their house or sell the furniture.
You still have to mow the lawn, so to speak.
You're left with the problem, and so all I can say is it's not my problem.
That's what chores teach us to do later. I have to laugh that I think my house is much more organized now that nothing's in it. Well, because my desk is like, wow, I can see everything on the top of it now, because there's not a whole lot there.
Right. And I just feel sorry for people like the executors of the artistic estate of Tim Holmes, because he has a 7,000 square foot studio which contains more than $2 million worth of art, and it's quite clear that Tim is never going to clean that up, and so it will be left to someone else at some point, but that's not a Tim's problem, right?
Well, right, and it's not a Tim's problem at all, and that's
And so when I proposed the conference that we're going to have next June, I said, don't vacuum, don't change a thing. Keep it the way it is.
Keep it the way it is. Right.
And so, anyway, okay, I want to read Diane's commentary on the Hourglass.
Yes.
I'm not that fond of this poem, but I include it because an hourglass image appeared in a half dozen poems. I like this quote by Meister Eckhart. When the soul wants to experience something, she throws out an image in front of her and then steps into it. I mentioned in the introduction that I was sometimes living in this world, sometimes in another, which dovetails with a comment by Edinger. In the vicinity of the constellated self, time and eternity intersect, and there may be a brief suspension of the usual categories of consciousness. That is to say, in the Jungian theory, an experience of the self falls outside our understanding of time. The ego is in time and the self is in eternity. The ego is the agent of the self in time, so to speak. So the hourglass is an amazing image, both temporal and eternal, of our individual participation, each tiny particle, in the external flow of life. We as humans pass through time with the chance to reflect our own individual and unique aspects of the eternal self. Right here on Earth, we tend to think of time as a linear moment by moment affair and eternity as an endless period of time after life. Not so, says mythologist Joseph Campbell. Eternity isn't some time later. Eternity has nothing to do with time. Eternity is that dimension of here and now that all thinking in temporal terms cuts off. The experience of eternity right here and now in all things, whether thought of as good or as evil, is the function of life. That sort of turns things upside down, doesn't it? And this is exactly the point of my mentor, which is I was thinking of a point in time, an ego, and he was thinking of, what's this guy going to represent 5 years from now, right?
And he was basically playing William Blake, eternity in a moment and heaven in a grain of sand.
Right.
And then Diane here with the whole grain of sand too. There's the ego. There's so much talk in society. When you lose your ego, That's actually a pretty egotistical statement to think you can. It's a psychological complex. That you think you can amputate something that's abstract and interior. Just go ahead, be my guest. You just give it your best. But that's where, to me, kintsukuroi, the Japanese art of repairing a broken vessel with gold, silver, or platinum lacquer comes in, where we are all better for having been broken, except if I substitute the word broken with experienced, we are all better for having lived. So even your experience there with your mentor, where he was playing the heaven in a grain of sand, an eternity in a moment, by pulling you into that, and not by fire and brimstone raining it down on you. He opened you to that. And I think that heaven in a grain of, heaven in a grain of sand and eternity in a moment happened at that moment when he said, well, we had to get you to $750 loss. Basically, we had to get you to a hemorrhage for them to notice that, there's an opportunity here.
Yeah. And obviously that moment lives on just in this conversation.
Right.
Okay. And so that's the point, which was, had I failed, it would have been all forgotten. But because I didn't fail,
right,
it's a point.
Well, because you didn't fail, it becomes a cairn. Chiron, a
Yeah.
stacked stone trailhead.
Right.
Look at what someone has done. Look at where someone has gone. I mean, to me, when I'm out off trail, way off route, where all the good nature is, there are times though I'll come up on stacked stones, and I know I'm not the first to be here.
Right.
And all I think is, did they get eaten? Did they die? Did they enjoy this? Are they still here? I mean, but in that place where thereafter you succeeded, you stack some stones, so to speak, as a milestone for other people, like here in this video, to notice. Sure. Oh my God, I'm losing $750 a day. Or actually, you didn't say that. You said, I'm costing the company. So I love the fact that there wasn't even shame in that. It's just a price. I'm costing the company $750 a day. So there's an inherent parenthetical. Is that a value? You're not saying I'm not of value. You're just making the admonition of the awareness that this is a number. Yeah, and I am associated with this number. Yeah. And are you good with this number? Because, I mean, so you're basically presenting it for review. And then he's like, well, we had to get you there to make sure they notice. Yeah.
And mind you, that was $750 for 41 years ago.
As I say, in the 1970s time, right, and 1980s. That's the thing too. Is but across that whole story, one thing I just now noticed is there was actually no. It wasn't that there was no shame or guilt. There was actually zero interrogative. Mm-hmm. You weren't asking questions. You were making statement. I'm costing the company. You weren't saying, is it okay for me to? You said, I'm costing. This is what's up. Yeah. And so when that happens, I kind of, if my hair's sticking up ever, right? Someone calls it, I like a better reception. You had a really good reception then, because you just simply told it like it was.
Okay, so N1 here asked what book I was reading, and I was reading, besides that one, I was reading this book, Religious But Not Religious, Living a Symbolic Life by Jason Smith. I can't show his name with one hand. And he will be appearing next Saturday. I put the link on the YouTube chat. And so I'll also put it here for you. I think Yuan is signed up for Wisdom Path anyway, because it's one from where you live, Glenn, you can certainly get on the Zoom panel. And the only problem with that will be that it'll be 2:00 in the morning where you live. But anyway, and the big cat says, Kant says that time and space disappear when human consciousness disappears. That remains, what remains is eternity. Yeah, okay, I agree.
Actually, could you say that again? Because I'm glad he brought that up, because I've always had a bit of an issue with Kant's abstraction. And especially with Kant for Everyman. Could you read that again?
Kant says that time and space disappear when human consciousness disappears. What remains is eternity. Okay, so.
Well, that reminds me of you. If a tree falls in the forest and your wife doesn't hear it, are you still wrong?
No,
Is it?
No, if I make a statement in the forest and my wife doesn't hear it, there's no woman present, am I still wrong?
You're still wrong. Yeah, that to me actually kind of, I don't want to be too, have too much levity there, but it aligns with Kant's statement,
Well,
because there's
I
a
can
whole
assure,
mystery missing.
right. And I can assure everyone that when you get married, and this will become more and more true, I cannot open my mouth in this house without my wife having a contradictory thing to say about it. Okay.
Enantiodroma,
Well,
incarnate.
it's actually yin yang, right?
Yeah.
So there's always another side, and you get married so that you see the other side and have a whole life, right?
So please be unthreatened when you do that.
Right. So
Go in with, I'm
know,
costing the company 750, not why am I or how am I?
Right. And so you just have to keep going, right? Otherwise, you're going to end up having a lot of marriages, and that's going to be not good.
And then you have to move to California because that's what they do there. So,
Right.
my line is always complete, never finished, lifelong.
Yeah.
So take another step.
Okay, so moving on to Jerry Wright here, who we've given short shrift to today. I'm reading from A Mystical Path Less Traveled by Jerry Wright, and this is a journal entry. God images and religions are created by the human imagination. They are inspired by numinous experiences that we do not create, can't control, or command to appear. As human creations, God images and religions have a limited lifespan, perhaps several generations at most. Once primary experiences of the holy are shared, dogmatized, and canonized, they die. Their death, however, may be denied for years, even generations. It seems easier to nod to the religions of our ancestors than to respond to our own experiences of the numinous, a word that means a nod from the gods.
Right.
And
the God winks.
Yeah, boy, is that true. So we keep talking about Abraham's vision that told him not to sacrifice his eldest son. That literally was the end of the official end of conscious human sacrifice in the Abrahamic religions. Until then, we were sacrificing our children to placate the gods, and this happened in every society. And because Abraham had that vision, Jews and therefore Christians and Muslims don't officially sacrifice their sons. Now, in fairness, we still do, and we have to be aware that when we send young men off to war, typically it's men who are in battle. Those are potentially the sacrifices of our sons. And
and corresponding to that and aligning with that, and on actually the other side of that is the child becoming the parent of the man. You sacrifice your own youth to become your adult. So there is the self-birth first rite of passage metaphorically, but if you do notice through history around that time, when Abraham's vision was starting to be, proliferated, that actual occurrence stopped occurring so much.
Yeah. And
people stop that.
At least in Western thought, we did. And, I think that if we look at the Incas or the Aztecs, they may have done human sacrifice much later,
and up till actually 600 to 700 years ago. I mean, the blood is almost still fresh on those ramps.
Right. And and in in Japan, the whole idea of the kamikaze, that was just before my lifetime. So
yeah, that's a whole. It's interesting. The kamikazes are interesting because they evolved out of the samurai, except the samurai were never one-offs. They weren't up for giving up. They were up for integrity, longevity, and valor, and they would accept nothing else, but they wouldn't go to their death on purpose.
yeah.
And the kamikazes actually flipped that and took that whole Buddha way and said, we're going.
Yeah.
So and the honor of death before they even got there was stronger.
Yeah. Now, the big cat says a couple more things. He says, we live within time because that is all the human mind can understand. Time is likely an illusion. We cannot conceptualize eternity with our limited human brains. We can only intuit. Well, I would say it's not an illusion. It's a psychic fact. And
I would use a bandmate of mine and say, time is the drummer. And if we don't have the drummer, we've got nothing.
Yeah. And, when Jung was on Mount Elgon in Kenya, and he looked out over the seas of different herds of animals, he said, well, think of this. I'm the first human being to observe this. And so I am, in effect, God's consciousness. I see what I, as God, have done, or as a part of God, have done, and I am conscious of it. Whereas all the other creatures were just eating and begetting for hundreds of millions of years, which Jung refers to as a rather dim consciousness.
Well, and here's the thing too. He was the first Western white Caucasian to do that. How many other elders and medicine men and women were on that same precipice and saw the same thing?
But they would have been like a giraffe. I mean, you're a giraffe and you eat and beget. That's it.
Well, I just don't think they brought it back in Latin and Greek footnotes. I think they probably had the same experience, and they probably passed it down so that their sons and daughters would come up to that same place again, like Jung brought to us.
Right. But humanity has only been doing this for like 200,000 years. And
it's pretty short.
And all of us have ancestors that go back 3.5 billion years.
Right.
And we have to recognize that. So,
and I think the first DNA structure must have been coffee. The second one was tea. I know that, but the first one, I'm not sure. I think it was coffee. Anyway.
Right. So I'm a little contra to the idea that the human mind or time is likely an illusion. It's not an illusion.
No, I think it's just
we talk about it, and because we talk about it, it exists in the psyche. It's not necessarily a physical thing, but that's where we have to have a change of consciousness. We have to start recognizing that there are more things than just physical objects. Okay.
Well, and I like to say that time is one of my favorite topics, and time gives life to the clock, but the clock means nothing.
Right.
And so to me, it's how the question becomes, how do you receive life? And that's, to me, the question of time.
Right.
Not is time a fiction. I don't want to go into Heidegger or Hegel or Aristotle or 25, all 25, 30 of them. To me, I go, I hate to say it, but horseshit. It's philosophy, and that's up here.
It's all rational.
It's all rational.
Yeah.
And it's not even logos rational. Its reasons are unreasonable. That is a very articulate opinion. I mean, philosophy was one of my majors. So what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't make me an expert. But philosophy is an elegant opinion, is really. And then I have to say, and there's no accounting for taste.
Right.
I mean, who doesn't like strawberry ice cream? Well, some people don't. Right. But then you drop it down to, how does that come into your life?
Right.
That, to me, is the question of time.
And Jung's big point is, I believe the psyche is real. And if you don't
it's a fact, right?
A fact. And if you don't believe that, then you think either the uranium or the laboratory equipment created the human bomb or the atom bomb.
Exactly. And that's exactly
good Freudian slip there, the human bomb.
Yeah, the human bomb. Right. Or a Jungian slip, as it were. But no, but that's true though too. And actually, that example you just brought up is the 5 blindfolded people touching the elephant. And there really isn't an elephant. I mean, here's the tail, here's the hoof, here's the trunk, here's the eye, here's the snout, here's the ear. It's all no, it's not. It's not the elephant. There is no elephant. So that it's about, then to me, there is no elephant is a statement of, it's important to be comfortable with the not knowing, which then drops me back to, how do you receive time? How do you receive your time? Which to me, if I push that clay back in, how do you experience your life is the question. And then there's no right or wrong answer.
Right. So Sean and the big cat are having this exchange where space would still remain as its pure potential, says Sean. And the big cat, of course, our experience is locked in time. It's a prison for us. Okay, it's a prison, but it's nonetheless.
That's just a boundary. That's a powerful limit. It's not incarceration. And the architect in me will tell you, there is place and there is space and there is a difference. And place is that which ossifies, becomes bone, or is placed around a feeling or a nothingness. And the space is that which is within. And it doesn't need form. It doesn't need form. It wants shape, but it doesn't need form. And so
this is the basic thing that scientists have trouble with, which is they cannot explain life. Okay, they can describe a couple of characteristics of life, like it will reproduce and it will be contained, but
they can recite the alphabet song, but they can't do differential equations with it.
Something like that.
Yet.
Right.
Calculus has not occurred in that language yet. Yeah.
Okay, so let's try to get through one more exchange here. So the next one is click, and the image, if Jordan will hold it up.
Hold this up.
Is DNA.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
Methylation, 2006 by Christopher Bach from the Max Planck Institute for Informatics.
That's a beautiful little binary star system syzygy.
Right. Okay. So the poem that was given to Diane numinously is, string each glass bead through the eye of the needle, held between the first finger and thumb, slowly passing down the coarse thread until you hear the faint click of one bead touching the other. happy to be together again after so long a coming apart. Okay, so it's click.
Wow.
The topic is click. String each glass bead through the eye of the needle, held between the first finger and thumb, slowly passing down the coarse thread until you hear the faint click of one bead touching the other, happy to be together again after so long a coming apart. And of course, the DNA molecule is a molecule, it's not an atom, and it contains millions of atoms. And so
the two things that come to mind to me here are John Tarrant's book, The Light in the Dark, or The Light Within the Dark. And then I believe it was, I can't remember his name, probably 70s LSD guy, but The Non-Local Mind, where the studies were, two things that have encountered one another will forever be touched. And
Timothy Leary?
No, it was right after,
Okay.
a little more, less mainstream, I guess, than him. So go Timothy Leary, Eckhart Tolle, but give me somewhere in the middle between.
Okay, well, let me give you the quote here. The quote is, "Neither gold nor glass compares with her." And the quote is from the book of Job, and he's saying this of wisdom. Job 28:17. Job 28:17. Neither gold nor glass compares with her. And he's talking about Sophia, which is wisdom. And
what's interesting,
it's also
embedded,
the feminine principle. It's the feminine principle also. So,
well, it is, and in that, to me, what's embedded there is gold does not patina, gold does not rust, gold is also soft and malleable. Glass is tension and compression together. It is all formed. So there's a masculine and feminine, even in the gold and the glass statement, where there's a formlessness, gold, an amoeba, and then glass is a sculpture, a life that has formed. But when he says neither, basically neither either, it's both. Because you can't compare two without putting them together. And so to me, when the wisdom piece here is that you need the gold and you need the glass, you need the formlessness, you need the malleability, you also need the specifics of glass, the sharpness, the cutting. I find
that none of that has to do with Eros, and that's the point, it seems to me.
To me, the Eros makes the glass from the gold. That's even the further hidden piece, because you need to know how to temper a fiery life, hot liquid to make glass. But then the thing is, then the Eros is gone. So anything that is made is inherently logos.
Yes.
But the Eros is always there. So it's, in a sense, I'm wondering now, the psychic synapse, the interstice, the space between.
Yeah.
Eros is the thing that's always present. It's just a generative force. It doesn't need form.
Right. And so Justin Case has arrived, and
Welcome.
the big cat comments, how can we separate time and space? They are a continuum. They seem inseparable. Well, yes, I agree. Time and
I think there's an experience piece that needs to be added there, because time and space are, to me, independent. But if you add experience, they become interdependent.
Right. Okay. So let me go back to the Radiant Sutras.
Oh, good.
112 gateways to the yoga of wonder and delight. And in the prelude to the sutras is this statement. The Bhairava Tantra is set as a conversation between the goddess, who is the creative power of the universe, and the god, who is the consciousness that permeates everywhere. For short, they call each other Devi and Bhairava, or Shakti and Shiva. They are lovers and inseparable partners, and one of their favorite places of dwelling is in the human heart. And so the point is, E equals MC squared. Shakti is matter and Shiva is energy, or vice versa, or they both are both, right? But Einstein said it best: E equals MC squared. So that's all we need. Who keeps time if there's no observer, right? Doesn't mean that atoms aren't spinning around and around. It just means there's no observer. Okay. So the commentary for this click is: psychologically, this poem speaks to the ego's restored relationship with the self after a long period of estrangement. Of course, the relationship was always there. Jung would say it's part of our psychological DNA. Only now it's a conscious partnership. In his book, Archetype of the Apocalypse, Edinger hopes that more individuals will become aware of the need to reconcile and reunite the opposites within. Quote, I think it is evident to perceptive people that the apocalypse archetype is now highly activated in the collective psyche and is living itself out in human history. In this respect, the fundamentalists are right in their preoccupation with this particular imagery. The trouble is that they are approaching the phenomenon with a psychology that was operative 2,000 years ago. They really do expect to be caught up into the air in a literal rapture in the end of the age. Yet there is no doubt from the psychological data that the apocalypse is now living itself out in the collective psyche in an unconscious and therefore destructive way. How massive the catastrophe will be will depend on how many individuals have achieved a sufficient level of individuation to know what's going on, unquote. Wow, okay. What's going on is a transformation of the God image that brings together again what was rent 2,000 years ago, namely the dark side, the body, and its missing feminine. Okay. Just struck a coin, a nerve here. And okay, so I'll read one more comment. Did you hear that, Jordan? Or
Just the last bit.
Well, okay. I was reading
Jerry's.
Well, I was reading Diane's commentary, which is mostly a quote from Edinger.
But for click, you mean?
Yeah, right. It's about more and more of us have to come to consciousness of the fact that the archetype is alive and living in us. The archetype of the apocalypse it's happening now.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that's coming at the end of days. It's playing itself out. And this goes back to my fundamental comment about archetypes, that once they begin to play, they don't stop until they're done. And
Well, yeah, and from my perspective, the one thing I always said with architecture in the studio with everybody was, do not be afraid of your interrogating tensions. They will destroy everything that is unnecessary. And that is then the function of the creative principle, is not to, part of it is to cleanse. Part of it is to bring things in that don't exist yet.
right.
And so to me, that apocalyptic archetype, that which is the destroyer, that's actually the phoenix in disguise.
Right. So the big cat says, we filter everything through the human brain. We just don't know what reality is. We experience time and space. There's likely much more than we can comprehend. I place it in eternity. Sean says, we comprehend little. I agree with you. Well,
so I have to say, that's why I love to say it's really important to be comfortable with the not knowing. And life is what will pass you by while you're way too busy making plans. So you might as well get on with the living of it.
Right. So Ganderstein says, some people feel as if Christianity is there to be abused, having no mystical worth. They almost seem to cringe when it's mentioned. I feel it has powerful worth. Do you feel that it has worth? Surely I do. There's no doubt.
And I'll synopsize it with anything that has the discipline of the ritual. Christianity, Islam, military, martial arts, painting, poetry, architecture, writing, anything that has the discipline of the ritual will bring a mastery. And I think the mastery just leads to further discovery. And that's one of the points of life, is just to not be worried and to live it.
So the big,
not to overgeneralize, but that's pretty much my overgeneralization.
Yeah. So just in case has given us Einstein's equation. Einstein said energy E is equal to mass times its speed squared.
The speed of the light squared.
Which is E equals mc squared, right?
Which I always found a little interesting, because if we can't exceed the speed of light, how are we going to square it? So there's an eternity in the moment. Heaven in a grain of sand. That to me, E equals mc squared is Einstein in mathematics, not arithmetic. In mathematics, saying William Blake's heaven in a grain of sand, eternity in a moment. I mean, that's because the grain of sand is the M, the mass.
Well, and everything is either mass or energy, and it's constantly changing between the two. That's why it's Shakti and Shiva.
And then there's the arrows that
lovers.
You can't see. But that is the connected principle throughout the whole of that equation. If not Eros, then what? And so I think that I'm glad he brought up E equals mc squared with the Shakti, the Shiva, heaven a grain of sand, eternity in a moment. There's the whole Eros Logos gig going on there, where we can perceive the Logos, but we feel the Eros, but we don't need to explain it. I think that's the big piece, is people think that without proof or reproof, something is less than. And I think that's a bad powerful limit instead of a really enhancing powerful limit.
Right. How can you measure the amount of energy that I can express in a lifetime?
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And that's
right. So, okay. So some people, let's see.
What do we have there on the YouTube?
Okay, so the big cat says Christianity is a powerful religion. It has a great deal of worth. Yes. Justin, some people don't know what they talk about. For instance, what the terms mystical means to Jesuits. And the big cat says the Jesuits rock. Yeah, go Pope Francis.
Go Jesuits.
Yeah, and
no, that you want to talk about someone who knows how to teach people how to learn. That's
yeah,
they got that down.
So, and one says, I had a thought the brain could be a quantum computer making relative reality for life. Yeah, okay. Justin, no, not the speed of light, just the speed. Light has no mass, or it couldn't move that fast. If it had, it would take an endless amount of energy.
Well, that actually flies in the face of light being a particle and a wave, both at the same time, which is also the eros and the logos. The way the particle is the logos and the wave is the eros. And
right. So trying to explain light is like trying to explain life. Okay, let me go to one more Jerry Wright comment, and then we'll wrap up. Okay, so the mystic knows that the darkness is as revealing and as sacred as the light. That paradox conveys more truth than one-sided reason. That ambiguity reveals, even as it conceals, the underlayer of reality. That certainty is food for the religious faint of heart, while doubt enlarges the soul. And that redemption most often emerges from the most unlikely, surprising source. We love illumination and insight, yet what precedes such is most often a pregnant darkness. Okay. So
which to me commends the importance of silence.
Right.
And the pregnant darkness. That's silence, the quiet before the storm.
Which is how I'll go back to the Shakespeare in Love scene. We don't know how it will all work out all right, but it will somehow.
Well, yeah, completely. And that's also an expression of the calm before the storm.
Right. And
which actually, if you've been in North Texas, you understand the hairy, anxious aspect of the pressure drops. So you actually fall away. You're no longer contained. I mean, there's a basically a sense of you are no longer held by the space you're in right before a tornado. And it's interesting that nature pulls everything away in the low pressure.
Okay, so Gander, we'll close with Ganderstein's comments and our reactions to them. I find it interesting that the Christian doctrine discusses an eternal realm referred to as heaven. Most feel light stems from God. Einstein's theory shows that the closer to the speed of light you get, the more time slows, i.e., eternal, timeless. I think when we get down to discussions at this level, we're discussing how many angels can dance on the head of a pin,
right?
And so I don't find a lot of purpose in just arguing these eternal issues. I mean, it's sort of like eternal mind, eternal recreation of the eternal mind.
Well, and if I may, as a former philosopher, these kind of concepts, depending on none of the 25 to 35 normal ones we utilize, go closer and closer to the black hole and to the singularity. And that's cool, but that's just a larger ocean. And that's a flow. But then we're going to ebb back to here. And so I think that even in that abstract philosophy, that's just simply placing itself closer to the singularity or to eternity than it is to here. And I find that that is just a larger waveform of an ocean. But I personally find I get a lot more from here than I do from there, even though I'm kind of there daily. That's not what I talk about, though. That's what we swim in. So I think back to Eros and Logos, and Colleen Keebert might agree. You may as well. It's what we bring back. It's.
Yeah.
I may travel to eternity. I may not have walls. I may just surf over the liminal horizon and drop in with no psychic scuba gear necessary. But when I come back, if I don't have anything, then you can say, did you just waste your time or were you on vacation? I mean, so why didn't you bring anything back for us if you can do that?
I have a great example of that, which is physicists who have this thought experiment, which I think is backed up by some crazy algorithm, but basically it says that if the closer and closer you get to a black hole, the flatter and flatter you get. And, you know, yeah, I mean, you know, if you get close to a black hole, you know, you can say that you exist still, but I wouldn't call it alive.
well, it's funny. You just with that, it's funny. I haven't heard that one, and that's good because that brings up two images. One is here's a picture of our solar system, right? All the planets except the Earth's all flat, and it says, "Well, this is awkward." and then underneath it, it's like we know this is not true. If the world were flat, the cats would have already knocked everything off of it by now.
Right. That's a good one. You know, so some of this stuff, you know, doesn't even merit comment because, okay, you know, physicists can mutually masturbate all they want. And you can play games with mathematics, and you know, but where does that get us? Okay.
Well, and I always say, don't worry about having tissues. Tie a rope to that tree before you go into that place, because you're going to need that to get out of the quicksand.
Yeah.
Because you're going to churn up logic, and you're going to get stuck in the logic, and then the logic's going to suck you down, and you won't have a gearbox.
Yeah. Well, just in case it makes a further statement, he says, I'd say that for many of the basic questions, such as the origin of the universe, the mind-matter bridge, etc., neither science nor religion knows the answers. And I would just say that the mind-matter bridge is, you know, quantum physics lives in the unified field, and the unified field is right here. Okay, that's where it is. It's the unified quantum physics and Newtonian physics live in a field that's within the human psyche.
I think there's a lot of people who are getting concrete shoes, like the psychological mafia, concrete shoes of getting stuck in, well, what's this mind matter bridge? It's like, where's your experience? Now, wait, you're going to say this, and that's all we hear, except if you don't have this, which needs no words ever.
Right.
And it will not ever have words, but you feel it. That gives the ground or the space for the place of those words. So I think that what happens is I feel that people get too hooked on here you go, the attorney, the lawyer, what is proved or reproved. And me as a former expert witness, I mean, I'm nowhere near where you were, but my job was just to barbecue opposing counsel. So, allegedly just to do the facts, but it's a legal system, not a justice system. And I think that people get hung up too much on the after the equals sign part instead of the E part.
Well, and people get
like E equals MC squared.
Yeah.
The E is more important.
People want to take everything by reductionism back to E equals MC squared. But oh, by the way, there is layer upon layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of dimension to everything that there is. And so we're only coming in and we're taking a small slice. If you look at a cut where there was sedimentary rock and you see all these different layers,
right? No pyroclastic flows, etc. Right?
All that stuff. You may understand some of them, but what about the ones that are still underground that you haven't gotten to?
That's the perfect point to me too, with E equals MC squared. If I look at this and I put equals and blot out my face so no one has to look at it, E equals MC squared. There's a whole world in MC squared of things. There's a whole world in E of not things. And so to me, if you don't have either, you have neither. So, and Vivian, great to see you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just saw she's going.
Yeah, thank you, Vivian. We'll see you soon.
But to me, the E is a whole world. That's the unconscious.
Yeah.
And the E is the darkness, and the E is the capital S shadow, and the MC squared is the numinous conscious light. And but they're together. That's what to me is so interesting about, to me, E equals MC squared is the quantum formula. Yeah. It's just so simple. I mean, that's E equals MC squared is the one you can tell the street sweeper. You go, oh yeah, I heard about that.
Right. Well, as the quote I was referring to in Jung is answer to Job 751. And in 752, he makes the point that every psychic or physical fact, that psychic facts would be in the books of natural science if they were physical. They're not physical, they're psychic. And so the best we can do is gain a conception of them. And so this idea behind the mind behind the universe and all that stuff, we have a long way to go before we're going to find the mind behind the universe, because the universe started 13.8 billion years ago, and with lots of hydrogen atoms. And now we have giraffes and roses and thinking human beings, and those are facts we need to accept.
Well, definitely. And I mean, when you started going into that, I mean, page 265, paragraph 421 of Ion came to mind. And it's the basic idea of ascent and descent can be found in the tabula smaggardina. And the images, the stages of transformation have been depicted over and over again, above all in the Ripley scroll and its variants. These should be understood as indirect attempts to apprehend the unconscious processes of individuation in the form of pictures. Okay. And so there's your living symbol right there.
Okay, so Gander asks, this is the last question for today, but do you believe that malevolence and benevolence are subjective? For example, do you feel that an assailant attacking an elderly woman is subjectively evil or good? I have heard this theory posited. Um, well,
Well, go
go
ahead.
ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I personally make a distinction between benevolence, and weakness. And to me, that a person attacking, that's cruelty. And all cruelty and meanness to me comes from weakness and lack of authority and needing to act out for attention to, but benevolence and malevolence, they're a higher octave. And they don't have to do with cruelty. They have to do with good and evil. And so I think there's an important piece that if you remove the shame and the guilt, you can drop up to malevolence and benevolence. But right there, someone attacking, no, that guy is weak and cruel because has no strength. I mean, so to me, that if you're unthreatened, you don't attack people. And if you're threatened, well, you may need to eat, but and so to me, I make a distinction between good and evil and malevolence and benevolence, because those are one thing, but someone attacking someone else, you could drop me to Africa, lions, antelope, and the cycles of life, and someone's got to eat, but that guy didn't need to eat that woman. So when he attacked her, that was weakness to me, is my thought.
Okay, well, these are
they're big questions.
They're spiritual. The question is 1 John 4:1, which was Jung's favorite verse, which says, "Examine the spirits, whether they be of God or not."
Yes.
And his answer to that was that, an adult human being has to develop a strong enough ego so that an adult human being can make that distinction. Okay, because if you are presented with a series of questions like this, you need to be selecting from the good as much as possible. I heard something yesterday that's sort of resonated, which is that, when you choose to be a member of the mafia, you know that you're going to die either one of two ways. You're going to die in jail, or you're going to die by violently. And so that's a choice. And the point, Jung's point about individuation and about the strength of the ego, we need a strong ego in order to make the right choice. And
it's also a containment vessel for the psyche.
And so nobody's written a book that gives you all the right answers, but there is an innate morality in the human species. Okay, and each one of us has to make our own decisions based on individuation. And so I'll make two observations about individuation. One, and this comes from Paul Vanderklay, which I love, which is, if you're using pornography and you don't have a real woman in your life, then you're not individuating, is what I would say. Okay, but Paul says, and having a real woman in your life is truly terrifying, which it is. Okay, because she's going to bring the opposite of you into the relationship, and that is truly terrifying. But you're going to know you're mature enough, and I don't mean by this gender. In other words, you can have
no. It's not prudish, and it's not gender related at all.
It's not gender, but if you bring a partner into your life, that partner is going to bring other things which are not you. Okay. That's
Well, and if
why
I could,
that's why Jordan's and my conversation works here, because Jordan brings things which I don't and wouldn't
and vice
necessarily.
versa.
Right.
Yeah, and vice versa.
Right.
And if I will then add into what you just said, to actually let me pour something into the terrifying part.
Mhm.
The part of that terrifying part is that they get you, your partner gets you to stock your own trout pond. And the problem is that means you need to pour yourself into yourself. They force you to open up and go, what's in there? And
Right.
you're like, oh, there's nothing. Well, I suggest you start to stock
Right.
that pond. I mean, so yeah, it's
we're
back and
talking
forth.
about the definition of individuation now.
Yes.
And so the definition of, I can tell you what it's not. Individuation is not using pornography unless there's a person of an opposite in your life. If they're in your life and pornography helps stimulate you both, and it's conscious, then you're individuated. But if you're not, if you're hiding it and you're not conscious, and you don't have a partner in your life, then you're hiding yourself from your own individuation. And the same thing applies to using handles anywhere in social networking. If you, and I do use a handle in one way, and that is I normally respond to comments as Carl Jung Depth Psychology Reading Group, but everybody knows that that's me. So it's really a nickname, right? It's I'm not hiding my identity in that respect. But if you're hiding your identity and you're interacting on YouTube or any other social network, then you're not individuated and you're not individuating.
And I think you make a good point there that makes a distinction between utilizing one thing as a tool for a couple or partners to utilize, like a crescent wrench or do you want a Phillips or a flathead screwdriver, you know, versus hiding from yourself by immersing yourself in not doing what you're looking at. So to me, there's an upside and downside that is actually malevolent, personally, because you know, lovers love what they love. Everyone likes what they like. So from that, to me, there should be no fetishes. Fetishes are by contrast. That's someone else describing someone else's difference. But what you like is, well, the breath is your air. And that's that. So there's no reason for shame or guilt. That's just what's going on. And when you have that kind of honesty with your partner, honestly, in these days, that's kind of pornographic. Right. I mean, in that way. But so I think the difference there you've made very aptly is between utilizing something as an extension or a tool versus a substitution for life.
Okay, and one other thing I'd like to bring people's attention to is the Alice Neal exhibit at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. You can find many videos about this on YouTube. Just put Alice Neal Metropolitan Museum of Art, and it's really fascinating to see how this woman lived her life. She was a totally individuated person who stuck to her guns throughout life, and no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And what I found very interesting, I actually bought the catalog because I wanted to know more about this exhibit. And what I found in the catalog is the curators of the Met are phenomenally subversive. Okay, they are phenomenally subversive because
Go figure.
they present Alice Neal in a way that is boom, explosive, and tears at the fabric of the people that support the Met. And what's very interesting to me is I think it's on about page 71 of this catalog, but it's near there. If it's not there, I don't have the catalog anymore because I sent it to Tim. But there's a picture of Alice Neal protesting at the Met. She's got a sign, and she's protesting in front of the Met. Now, wait a minute, wait for it. And she's protesting an exhibit of Harlem artists. And the sign says, "Soul sold, soul sold."
Oh, wow.
And what's phenomenal about that fact is that the Met was just as subversive then as they are now by presenting her work. Okay, because in 1971, presenting an exhibition of Harlem artists would again have been very subversive in the 1% carriage trade.
Well, completely. And it makes me wonder if Alice Neal and Remedios Varo had lunch together quite frequently somewhere in the world, because they both lived in Frida Kahlo, and they all lived on their own terms.
Right.
I mean,
and yes, she did, they did.
Yeah.
And so I want to express my personal admiration and respect for the subversive exhibit of Alice Neal at the Met. You have to, you may not appreciate it entirely if you only look at the exhibit, which is available on YouTube.
But in context, right.
But in context, in terms of what it is and so on, it's just as subversive as it was then. Alice missed this point. Okay, mm-hmm. She missed the point when she was protesting against it.
You bring to mind something to me that's pretty silent in, for example, the architectural profession, and that is namely women. It's the most sexist profession there is, even more than law. But what's interesting to me is part of that is because of a capital S silence of the success of the women. For example, do you know who Julia Morgan is?
No.
Do you know who William Randolph Hearst is?
Sure.
Do you know about Casa Grande, his huge mansion?
Sure.
And the big tiled pool?
Yep.
Yeah, that's her.
Mm-hmm.
How would you know that? And the thing is, because when she was interviewed and asked about Frank Lloyd Wright, they said, he just got a new cord. What did you do? She said, that means he's about to go broke. He got that before the bank would yank it. And that way he'd look okay enough to get the next job. Yeah. He's about to be desperate. Now I have some work to do, so you move along now. And she went back to her like 250 to 400 person firm that she ran. Mm-hmm. So if you look, for example, at the women in architecture that you don't hear about, they are this Eros foundation of a lot of the things. Like, I say William Randolph Hearst, I say tiled pool. I don't even have to say Casa Grande. You'll go, I know that pool.
Yeah.
But who knows the architect? Because she didn't have billboards. She kept her nose down and kept working.
Yeah.
And so it's a matter of, as she said one time in an interview, I don't have time to be desperate. And I'll see you later. And she went back to her office because she had work to do. But that that to me is that whole, is it Christianity? Is it Islam? Is it the military? Discipline of the ritual. She had that.
So if anybody has a question about what an individuated person is like, go read about
Alice
Neal.
Yeah, Alice Neal.
And listen to some of her interviews on YouTube. And she is totally individuated.
Yeah, she's a character. I love her.
Right. And so peace, everyone. Jordan, have a safe travel.
Thank you.
You're not going to join us tomorrow, I presume.
No, not tomorrow night. I'm gonna get the truck tomorrow and I'm gonna load it, and then I'm probably gonna turn in really early so that on Tuesday I can just leave whenever.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I won't be there tomorrow night.
Right. Safe travels. I hope.
Thank you, and no banjos.
Stay north.
I will.